So I want to talk a little bit about LSU football because, as many of you know, they have not lost a game dating back to 2018 after going 15-0 in 2019 in what I believe is the greatest college football season, the greatest college football team of all time, with perhaps just the 1945 Army Black Knights and the 1995 Nebraska Huskers having anything at all to say about that after the way that they dispatched their opponents. I mean, we're talking about destroying Georgia. We're talking about beating the hell out of teams like, well, Oklahoma, 63-28. Though Texas played them close, Auburn played them close, and it was a really fun game against Alabama, especially toward the end. You look at other games like Arkansas, like Texas A&M, and you can see just how much better they were. But if you were going to knock them, the thing to knock them for would be the defense. Now, perspective here is Oklahoma State gave up fewer than 30 points a game. Wasn't that far off from the Tigers. 25.8 points per game they gave up to opponents in 2019. And you would think that that was, a smaller number than one that you would give to a 15-0 team, kind of like, let's say, Clemson in 2018, where their defense was very much their calling card. But when you take into account just what happened for them and just how bad their pass defense was, it makes more sense. As a matter of fact, having roundtable discussions on this Jim Thorpe Award Selection Committee about the best defensive backs in the country, one of the things that was frequently brought up was just how bad LSU's pass defense was compared to others. I mean, we're talking about at one point Oklahoma having a better pass defense than LSU, and I want to say it was better all the way up until the Peach Bowl. So what does Dave Aranda leaving that defense mean for the LSU Tigers? To which one coach anonymously gave his opinion to Athlon Sports in one of their best features I think that they do in their preseason magazine, which is what do coaches say behind the guise of anonymity. To which this coach said, Dave Aranda's gone, but that's probably best for both parties. I think you saw a few times where Dave's scheme was intricate. When so intricate, it was overwhelming the players, especially if they had some depth issues or were banged up. Bo Pelini is going to live nicely with Ed. That caliber of athlete they have doesn't need to overthink it. 4 down, pin your ears back, and go. And I get that. I understand that because one of the things that I was really interested in looking at, as a matter of fact, last offseason, was the similarities between Pete Golding's defense at Alabama and Dave Aranda's defense at LSU, and they're kind of similar. And that makes sense because they both came up as assistants at Delta State, right? I mean, it makes sense. I want to say Ron Roberts was their mentor, but they have this really interesting system that has a 0 technique in the middle, and their ends are much more like 3 techniques. They're just, imagine Gerald McCoy on either side of Tyler Shelvin or Bravian Roy. And that was the kind of defense that he wanted to do. He wanted to use 3 dudes that could eat up 5 men. That's hard to do, so that you could probably keep your inside linebackers cleaner, and 2 of them could split the work. And then you got outside linebackers in the form of Caleb Chasen, who could be just stand-up pass rushers for you, bigger versions of Kenneth Murray Jr. on 3rd down, and then you could drop down safeties like Jacoby Stevens to be your 3rd down pass rusher if need be, and all of a sudden you look more like a 52 stack on 3rd and short situations than you do like a 3-4, which I really enjoy. I love the versatility, but I can also understand why you might be giving a little too much to your players that don't need a lot. As a matter of fact, I think there's an argument to be made at every level that coaches make offense and defense too complicated as a rule. One of the things that I got to talk with Mike Leach about not too long ago was just that, was everything is an effort to make something simple for the players, because the easier it is for them to execute, the more likely they're going to be able to do it over and over again. And then you have players who aren't thinking at all. They're just going out and they're playing. And knowing that Ed Orgeron can recruit the way that he has recruited, along with guys like Corey Raymond and Bill Bush, I can understand why the argument to move to a 4-3 and do something a little bit more simple and ask your defensive backs to just play their coverages is going to be a boon for that defense because they're so talented. Now, if the talent drops off and the level of recruiting drops off, then you got a problem. But that ain't been the case at LSU here of late. As a matter of fact, with Elias Ricks coming in this class, Dwight McGlothern coming in this class, along with Derek Stingley Jr., who is going to end up playing both ways at one point or another. Then you got Jacoby Stevens back there. You can make an argument they're going to be one of the most talented defensive back groups in all of the country, outside of perhaps Ohio State, Alabama, your usual suspects. Georgia also needs to be mentioned in there. They're going to be elite. Keely Ringo is a monster. You're going to wait and see this. On the other side of the ball, they also have had a change in, well, not play caller, but play designer. Because depending on who you talk to, Joe Brady is either responsible for all of LSU's success in the passing game, or none of it, or very little. What we do know is when Joe Brady came in, he came in with a definite idea of what he wanted to do, and he was brought in by Steve Ensminger, who went to Ed Orgeron and said, you remember this kid that came to like the Saints facility when we were there, and he started drawing stuff on the whiteboard? I think we should take a look at him. I think he can help us. They bring him in as passing game coordinator. He tells his wide receivers, over the course of the season, all of you are going to catch 1,000 footballs. During the offseason and the season, you're all going to catch 1,000 footballs. If we catch 1,000 footballs in practice and in games, we will be the best offense in America. And that's what they were. With Terrace Marshall, with Justin Jefferson, with Jamar Chase, with, my goodness, Moss. Then you add in there Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and you could see how good they were. I mean, Thaddeus Moss was so good. I don't think he dropped a pass all season last year, at least in games. Now, bringing in Scott Linehan, who I got no love for, I'm not certain that they're going to be able to keep that same level of offensive power. And that's even before we begin to talk about the differences between Miles Brennan and Joe Burrow, for which there might be a Grand Canyon, or there might be very little. We'll just have to wait and see on that. But what one coach said under the guise of anonymity about this was the one thing you hope they keep in the OC transition is the NFL emphasis, because Louisiana has the athletes to run it. Running backs lining up outside, receivers inside, shifting exotic personnel groups. All that stuff was a huge deal. It showed that at a top program, you can play around with more pro concepts than most people thought. Credit again to Ed for trusting those guys. It's also been a hallmark of what Ed Orgeron has done since becoming the head coach at LSU. He very much delegates. And by that, I mean takes his hands off the controls. You don't see Ed Orgeron out there calling plays. He might say, I want to run the ball here. I want to pass the ball here. I want to blitz here. But even that, he doesn't really get involved with. As a matter of fact, going into the Peach Bowl, when many of us, it needs to be said, believed that Clyde Edwards-Helaire was not going to play. What he had said was, no, I trust our coaches to make that decision. They believe that Chris Curry is ready to go. If we need to go with Davis Price, if we need to go with Emory, they'll make that decision as well. And I think that's one of the reasons why coaches really like working for Ed Orgeron. He gets out of the way. And he was going to get out of the way one way or another because he ain't an offensive-minded dude. And the thing that he does like to coach, defensive line, he's really taking his hands off of. And he's really tried to concentrate on 1, fundraising, 2, recruiting, and 3, being the face of the program, which he's doing in an excellent fashion, even as we've been in this very, very real crisis called a pandemic. So knowing all these things about what changes have been going on at LSU, I have been bearish on what they might be able to accomplish in 2020. I can see 4 or 5 losses. I can see it. They have the schedule and coming out of the SEC West that could give it to them. They're going to play a Texas team that I believe is the most talented Texas team we have seen in the Herman era, and probably the most talented Texas team we've seen in a decade. Alabama is on the schedule, okay? Like there are certain games that they're just not going to be able to get away from. And the changes in just their pass scale, right? Their 7-on-7 cannot be understated. Now, Eric Gilbert could be the best true freshman in America next year, playing tight end. And Terrace Marshall could join Jamar Chase as one of the best wide receivers in the country. But then you got to look at their offensive line and go, okay, a lot's changed there. You don't have your do-everything back in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who caught 50 balls and also rushed for 1,200 yards. Miles Brennan is unproven, and not in the good way. And then Bo Pelini has not had an opportunity to physically install his defense. Everything has been accomplished over Zoom or not at all. Then you're going to ask other players to move around their positions, notably Marcel Brooks, who might be playing some inside linebacker rather than some outside linebacker in a new scheme because he's more of a 3-4 OLB, might actually end up putting his hand on the ground. Then add into there, you got other guys that you expect to be the linchpins in your defense, like Jabril Cox, who hasn't played a snap with these guys, off-season or otherwise. There's a lot of impediments to repeating national championship success for LSU. And I don't think that it's so out of the question to think that this particular team is going to be in a bridge year to 2021, which makes a whole lot of sense for me. That's just where I'm at.